There are not a lot of weapons in Warframe that exude more personality and flavor than the Corinth. This one also has a pretty good following to boot, but ever since the Incarnate weapons, I feel like it's not getting the attention it deserves. So today, my friends, we're gonna be re-diving deeper into the Corinth Prime. As always, my name is Leyzar, and I got a couple of builds laid out. Something cheap, affordable, something for the more introductory level 10. But fear not, my friends, we're also going to endgame. Prime mods, galvanized mods, we're going to be talking about Rivens. I'm going to give you a couple of build variations to suit your needs, and much more. That said though, please bear in mind that my builds and guides usually take a more new player friendly approach. That's because I want anybody watching to understand how the weapon functions and its mechanics and how it should be built. So in case you're a veteran and you already know most of this stuff, you can either skip ahead or have a bit of patience. And with that out of the way, let's jump into the Corinth Prime. Let's begin by checking out how the weapon handles without any mods equipped. And for that, just a couple of our regular free shots. The Corinth Prime is a true blue shotgun, and this one has two fire modes. In primary fire mode, hit scan, heavy pellet attack, and extremely accurate for a shotgun. Take a look at the 15-meter test, roughly like so. As you can see, most if not all of the pellets will be landing within the crosshairs, which again for a shotgun is pretty good. Unfortunately, it does kick like a bloody mule. At the end of the day, you are talking about a shotgun. Sadly, the reload is also on the lengthy side. You're looking at 3 whole seconds to swap out the entire magazine, which is different to the regular version of the Corinth that had a turntable style of shell by shell reload, which is preferable depending on the player and the circumstance. However, the Corinth does have one more trick up its sleeve. This one has a secondary fire mode that will be consuming 4 ammo, and it launches this. Once again, we got a projectile which will be exploding at the end of its travel path, but unfortunately, if it's gonna be meeting a surface or an enemy, it becomes totally flaccid and basically doesn't do anything at all. So what you gotta do is explode that projectile before it makes contact with anything. Essentially, like this, if you want to get the most out of airburst. And this one explodes in an absolutely massive 9.8 meter explosion with a whopping 2200 blast damage. Awesome, right? Well, it's got a fall off of 90% though. So there you go. You're only going to be getting that huge amount of damage at the epicenter of the explosion. And you can make builds around airburst, but normally I would recommend you just use it as a primer of sorts or simply to keep your stacks up depending on the arcane that you chose. That's pretty much it for functionality. The last thing which I do want to point out, the magazine size is 20. If you're going to be using airburst, that means 5 total shots. Now, let's have a closer look at stats to see exactly what we're dealing with. Mod capacity 60 out of 60, and if you just got your Corinth Prime, it's 30 out of 30. How terrible! Jump into actions, plug in that auto king catalyst. Is it worth investing in the Corinth Prime? If you want the absolute best weapons in Warframe, if you're the guy that, dude, give me that top 10, let me see what are the best weapons in the game, I'm just gonna be using that because hurda, then no, definitely not. However, if you want the cool, quirky shotgun, which still packs one hell of a punch, especially to single target, you're gonna be loving your time with the Corinth. There are a few shotguns which are more flavorful than this one. I still recommend you give it a full spin. But how many pharma? Well, depends on you. Depends on what kind of mod you got, and if you got a Riven, etc. I'm gonna be recommending you start off with 3 polarities. That's gonna be 3 V polarities or Madurai, and carry on from there. In the XLS slot, is it worth unlocking? If you're a newer player, not so much. If you're more of a veteran, I don't need to tell you, yes? I do, then yes, it's kind of worth it. You can negate that recoil with counterbalance. If you don't like recoil on your weapons, take a look at this one. Significantly better. It still kind of kicks, so there is that to bear in mind. Or you can go for projectile flight speed, another fantastic idea. Now, plus PFS on a hit scan weapon. You should know that hit scan in Warframe is not exactly hit scan, but I'm gonna be getting into that just a tad later when we talk about galvanized aptitude. But until then, you can go with fatal acceleration, 40% projectile flight speed. What does that do, Leyzar? Well, it increases your fall off. You see 18 to 36 normal, but with fatal acceleration and 40% projectile flight speed, you're going to 25.2, 50.4. So essentially, up to 25 meters, you are getting 100% of the damage. Here's the thing though, normally the base 18 meters is more than plenty. I mean, are you gonna be further away than that? As for the explosion, it's not really gonna do much except to make it harder for you to explode those projectiles on time. So there is that to bear in mind. The accuracy doesn't really matter all that much on a shotgun, but as you saw, the weapon is pretty accurate. Ammo max is fine. Ammo pickup is pretty good. Fall off, you just saw fire rate of 1.42. Now, this is a semi-automatic weapon, but you can bind your fire to your scroll wheel. You can also try and use a macro, but the stance on macros is you do so at your own risk. So yeah, magazine of 20, multi-shot of 6 by default, 6 glorious pellets. That means multi-shot is gonna have an incredible effect on this one because my base is pretty high. Noise alarming reload, as you saw, at 3 seconds within this position. 3 little balls out of 5 little balls. Is it worth it? Yes. If you are the type of individual that simply wants, dude, I just want a Riven because I want to get the most I can out of this weapon because I love this weapon, then yes, go for it. And you want a priority, don't ya? Don't ya? Fine, I'll give it to you. Multi-shot, critical damage, and after that you can go for an element, you can go critical chance or flat damage. All of those will be fine. Try to get a harmless negative. Critical chance on this one by default, 30%. Beautiful. Critical multiplier, even more beautiful at 2.8x. Fantastic. Status per projectile, 9%, which you are gonna say, dude, that's pretty low. But you are firing 6 by default, and you're not gonna need like a ton of status applications out of this. You're just gonna need a couple of vitals if you're gonna be using vital on the weapon. More on that later. The damage by default, impact, puncture, and slash, and the highest is gonna be puncture, which is definitely not ideal, but puncture is not as bad as it once was. And you're still getting extra damage to heavily armored targets. As for air burst, you're looking at a terrible fire rate at 0.667. Critical chance is terrible at 4%. Critical multiplier is not great either at 1.6s, but the status chance is high at 50%. But is it though, considering it's one explosion? Well, here's the thing. You have the explosion and you also have the projectile making contact with a target. That projectile should never make contact with a target. You should always blow it up. So while you do have a whole lot of damage at 2200 blast damage and the range is fantastic, unfortunately you don't have the critical stats, and the drop-off, as stated before, is freaking terrible. So do bear that one in mind. Now, let's have a look at a standard introductory level setup. Damage point blank, multi-shot, vigilante armaments, and Hell's Chamber, critical chance and critical damage reducer, critical deceleration, as well as shrapnel shot. So we're not going to be using Ravage. Why? Ravage is absolutely terrible at only 60% critical damage. True, it is more reliable, so if you're newer to shooters in general, yes, go for this one. However, if you're fine aiming down sights, you're going to be getting a whole lot more out of shrapnel shot. Dude, I mean, the difference is humongous. It's very close to Prime Ravage, which offers you 110%. This one gives you 99. Hunter munitions for the slash, cause ya gotta. Chilling reload actually fixes one of the weapon's usability issues. You're going to 2.1 seconds reload instead of 3. Now obviously you can go for the 60-60 cold mod, frigid blast, and you're gonna say, dude, from a DPS perspective, no. If I factor in the reload on the DPS perspective, I'm still gonna be going with chilling reload. So try something like this. Now, if you don't have it, you can go with frigid blast. You can go with chilling grasp if you want to. Chilling reload is a nightmare mod, if I remember correctly. You gotta do nightmare missions, which are so terrible, and not really. Nightmare missions are not all that bad. You're gonna need a couple of mods from there anyway, so might as well get to it. Besides, if I remember, the only issue was the vampiric one. There was only one that was slightly harder than the rest. As for Toxic Barrage, Corrupted Vor in the Void, get to it. In the excellent slot, again, Fatal Acceleration if you enjoy the extra fall off, if you want to use it like more of a sniper, but keep in mind that it does make it more difficult to land precise airbursts. Not that you're going to be using that all that much for damage. So, let's test the weapon out like so. A build like this, an introductory level setup, I feel should never really go above Sortie Free. So let's go to Sortie Free. Sortie Free is gonna be 100, technically level 100, but let's give 20% on top of it, and without the Steel Path modifiers, let's use a couple of Airburst. Yeah, Airburst. Look how impressive that looks, but what does it actually do to my targets? Well, sadly, not a whole lot. As you can see, only the center target is actually affected heavily by the couple of airbursts that I shot. Everybody else, because of the drop-off and the unluckiness or luckiness of the procs, not a whole lot. So as you can see, airbursts normally you should use to prime your targets. You can build the entire weapon around airbursts, but it's not something I would recommend unless, of course, you know exactly what you're doing and you can expect mech performance. Let's go for headshots instead with the primary fire mode. Look at that, look at that. I got my slash, I got my vital, almost one-shotting this high level target. And now I got shrapnel shot. That's the extra critical damage. Look at that. A single shot, well, I think the target was a little bit affected. So let's try this guy. This guy was a bit affected. 31,000 bleed there, no problem whatsoever. 4 slashes, 4 vitals, 22,000. 6 slashes, 2 vitals, 31,000. You can absolutely annihilate your way all the way to Steel Path with this one. And when you get to Steel Path, my friends, you're gonna need something a bit more if you know what I mean, especially if you're gonna be going against high levels. So let's have a look at the next build. I'm gonna be using this as a base to explain certain things. This is not necessarily the build that you should go for. If you see a build like this, you're gonna be like, dude, that looks so impressive. Prime charge, prime chilling grass, galvanized health, savvy, galvanized acceleration. This for sure is an amazing build with primary frostbite. But I'm gonna be using this as a teachable moment. Yes? Now tell me, my friends, do you think this build will do very well in high level steel path? Yeah? No, not really. You see, this build focuses around corrosive and cold through the use of primary frostbite. This is something a bit more different than the usual meta. It's not gonna perform as well, but it is something on the different side. So let's try it like so. Essentially, again, corrosive cold. Let's try it on level 165, significantly higher enemies, but we're also gonna be enabling the steel path modifier since this is supposed to be a endgame setup. Yes? 45, and that is 40 stacks of frostbite. Go for a headshot, look at that. Beautiful, fantastic, and that's without the use of vital. Keep in mind that those slashes, that damage over time would be significantly higher if I am to use something like outside vital. Take a look at that. This is the kind of performance you can expect out of the weapon. Beautiful, fantastic. You are getting to one-shot territory, and I mean one-shot by simply contact damage alone, not anything else. Now, of course, if I am to activate vital, this will be Grendel's abilities, Nourish. One-shots, ga freaking lord, every single bloody time. Welcome to the void, my friends. Now you can track my buffs in the upper right portion of the screen. Right now I'm at 33 stacks of primary frostbite. Let's see what the weapon can do. This is without vital right now. I have not activated Grendel's Fang, and as you can see, it's very easy for me to essentially annihilate whatever stands before me in a single shot. Procs or no procs. Obviously the weapon is going to be significantly more powerful when you're going to be using vital, but when it comes to using vital, there are a lot of sources of vital, but if the weapon itself is not capable of producing vital, then it's not going to be fantastic for something like steel path circuits. So I do prefer in general builds which are self-sufficient and don't have to rely on the Warframe special abilities, a primer, a companion, anything of the sort. Now if I am to activate vital, what will happen? Well, not a lot in this case, because a one-shot is a one-shot. How much more of a one-shot do you want your one-shot to be? What's a bit annoying in actual gameplay is that if I spam too much air burst to keep up my stacks of frostbite, then I'm gonna be running into that reload a whole lot more often. And right now I don't have any augmentation for that. I'm looking at a whole 3 seconds reload, and that's definitely annoying. In situations such as this, a little bit of punch through would have gone a long way because I could have cleared essentially the entire bloody corridor. Right now, as you can see, vital is not really necessary, but of course it's gonna be increasing the potency of the build significantly. Now we got Torment, I got my stacks, I think he's here somewhere. Come here, Torment. Show you my gun. This is the kind of damage you can expect. Essentially, he got 2 to 3 shot there. When putting together a build, it's important to remember where exactly are you gonna be using that build. So for example, if I know I'm gonna be using this weapon in circuit sometimes, then I'm gonna have a separate build for circuit that is self-sufficient, in which case I'm gonna have to build vital on the weapon. It's also important to remember to try and access most, if not all, of the damage multipliers to make any build powerful. Now take a look at this build and tell me what damage multiplier is missing. Faction damage is missing, and flat damage, you might say. Flat damage is not missing. You're going to be getting some from Galvanized Savvy, and now we're going to be pausing on Galvanized Savvy because I want to explain certain things regarding its functionality, which even veterans, some veterans, still don't fully understand. And for that reason, we're just going to be using it alone. First of all, Galvanized Savvy's damage bonus, Galvanized Savvy, Galvanized Aptitude, as in Galvanized Shots damage bonus will apply differently depending on the weapon. Sometimes you have an additive bonus, as in as flat damage, in our case point blank or prime point blank, and sometimes you'll have a multiplicative effect. Again, this will come down to the weapon. Digital Extremes offers no explanations on this one, so it's down to testing, or you can always follow one of my guides. In the case of the Corinth Prime, it's gonna be additive, but how exactly does it work? When am I gonna be getting that fantastic damage bonus? What's important to take away from this is the fact that the damage increase is not applied on the hit that procs a new status effect, it is only applied on following hits. So that means you're gonna be getting nothing on the initial shot, right? If the target has no status effects whatsoever. Not true. You see, even hitscan in Warframe is not exactly hitscan. Hitscan in Warframe, it's better to think of it as really fast moving projectiles, and because they're going to be originating in the same point, in the case of the Corinth, for example, in the case of the Quartak, it has 4 points of origin because it has 4 barrels, so those can land on the same spot technically at the same time. In the case of the Corinth and most of the weapons in Warframe, that's not really the case. We're going to be spawning in level 10, so I can show you a bit of a demonstration. No steel path modifiers on this one. And we're just going to be using, as you saw there, Galvanized Savvy in this case. Now let's get ourselves some base values. We're just going to be going for body shots. So base white is 48, base yellow is 135. Let's do that one more time. And the proc you're seeing in the upper right portion of the screen, that is Galvanized Acceleration. It has no effect on shotguns. There we go, 135 with 48. And now I have one stack of Galvanized Savvy. If I'm going to be hitting this target that has no statuses on it, 135 with 48. Fantastic. One more time. 135, 48. 244. How did that work exactly? And now I have the two full stacks, of course. 244, 135. There were two instances of 244 damage on a target that did not have any status effects whatsoever when I shot. Essentially, these damage instances, our little pellets are making contact with a target at different intervals, even though they are from the same shot, because they don't follow the exact same trajectory, as you can see by the accuracy, by the spread of the pellets. So that means that one pellet is going to be making contact with a target a microsecond before the next one, and the next one will be having that damage benefit from Galvanized Savvy if the initial one applied a status effect. So that's how you get your damage from Galvanized Savvy, Galvanized Shot, and Galvanized Aptitude. You see, hitscan in Warframe is not really 100% hitscan. It's not instant damage on your target. Now that we understand that, we can make a couple of changes to the build. So if I want it to be self-sufficient, I'm going to be needing Vital on it, right? If I'm going to be needing Vital, then I'm going to be dropping Toxic Barrage and Charge Shell, and instead we're going to be making Vital on the weapon. Of course, you can make it with Prime Chilling Grasp, or you can make it with a 60-60. If you're going to be making it with a 60-60, you're going to be getting more consistent Vital procs on your target, but more damage with Prime Chilling Grasp. It's up to you. As for the last mod slot, well, in this one, what modifier don't we have? A faction modifier, sadly, and you're going to be going with something like Prime Cleanse Corrupted. Unfortunately though, since we were talking about the circuit, only the fodder enemies there are corrupted and will be affected by this mod. Enemies that are going to be dying from a sneeze anyway. The tougher enemies though, the Frax and the Dax, will not be affected by any faction modifier, and in general, if you're going to be building a weapon strictly for the circuit, so you want to have a separate loadout for the circuit, I don't recommend you use a faction modifier on that one. In our case, however, since we're going to be shooting corrupted heavy goons and we're going to be going to the void anyway, this will work a treat, and it is a very powerful modifier. When it comes to damage over time to bleeds, it applies twice the bonus it has. If you want more details on that, link in the cards right now for a full and detailed guide on how Hunter Munition works, because it plays very well into faction modifiers. Now, of course, I'm not really going to be making use out of Primary Frostbite, so instead what I'm going to be going for is the tried and true, the easy mode Primary Merciless that most players have at this point. Straight for a headshot as per usual, but this being a galvanized setup, we're gonna have to get a couple of kills. Oh my god, straight from the Batman, 74,000, but believe it or not, a build such as this can easily get you over 400,000 bleeds. Look at that, 144. The meta is the meta for a very good bloody reason, 140,000 bleeds on that one. The weapon is hella powerful, 355,000 on that one, 186, one shots galore, no problem at all. I don't need to worry about keeping 40 stacks up of Primary Frostbite or anything silly like that. One more time for the Void, and as you will see, the weapon can essentially one-shot whatever stands before it without any issue whatsoever. And this is a self-sufficient build. I don't need any outside help, I don't need any outside vital. And I don't need to worry about keeping my stacks up, because that's my main concern when it comes to a build that revolves around Primary Frostbite. I love Primary Frostbite, I think it's amazing and you should use it, as long as you understand you do need to manage those stacks. Acolyte time! Boom! Boom! Took a while. As expected, the corrosive cold setup did significantly better. However, you can still kill it fine with something like this. Now let's say I embrace the idea of getting vital from an outside source, something like Grendel's ability or perhaps the Panzerfull Profiler or a secondary primer. In that case, what I can do on the Corinth is make a true blue cold build, renounce Toxic Barrage, in which case of course, while I did like the flat damage and the reload speed of Primary Merciless, I can go back to using Primary Frostbite, and in the final slot, because I do want that front loaded damage, I do want this to be a one-shot build, go for even more flat damage. Usually I recommend 2 sources of flat damage on most builds. I got some from Galvanized Savvy and some front loaded from Prime Point Blank. Instead of this one, you can use yourself something like a Riven or even more Punch-Through or Multi-Shot. Go for headshots as per usual. This is without Vital, and we said we're gonna be embracing the idea of getting Vital from an outside source. Look at that. Still one-shotting or two-shotting these targets. That's 5 slashes, and 54,000, it's dead. Without any Vital whatsoever, but now we're cooking with gas, and of course everything changes. When you add Vital, everything bloody changes. Look at that. 207,000, and I'm not fully stacked yet. 100 something. Again, you do gotta look out for the Primary Frostbite procs. You gotta try to keep them as stacked as you can, but if you got a high enough density, something like a survival, you should be all good. 72,000, 230,000, 90,000, no Vital there. 329,000, 300,000 plus again. Fan-freaking-tastic. But there is one more way, and believe it or not, this is my favorite way to build a weapon, not necessarily the most powerful or anything of the sort. I forget about Prime Chilling Grasp, and I go for the strongest single elemental in the game, which is, especially in my case, because I'm dealing with heavily armored targets, Heat. Heat, my friends. And of course you can go with Blaze if your build allows you, but I'm gonna have to move stuff around, so I'm just gonna be going with Scattering Inferno. If I'm going with Scattering Inferno and this is a heat build on the weapon, then Primary Frostbite isn't really gonna cut it. Why don't you give Shotgun Vendetta a spin? Of course you can go with even more flat damage right now with Primary Merciless, but that would be 3 sources of flat damage: Point Blank, Savvy, and Merciless. Or you can go Merciless and Punch-Through instead of Point Blank. It's up to you. In my case, Shotgun Vendetta, 180% multi-shot, 75% reload speed, which helps out a lot with that 3-second reload. And this one, opposed to Frostbite, is easy to keep up. All you gotta do is be close enough to your targets, and the duration is 15 seconds on this buff. And this is actually my favorite build out of all of them. Of course, your question will be, dude, what's the most powerful? They're very neck and neck in terms of performance. It doesn't really matter all that much. Simply go for the one that you think you will enjoy more. Let's get a couple of kills with and without Vital on this one. Look at that. That's a one-shot. That's a one-shot, my friends. As before, I didn't even activate Grendel's ability yet, and that was 98,000 damage over time. Look at that. No Vital on the target, 70 something. Beauty Flare. Beauty Flare. How could you not love 100 foul no Vital? 100 foul no Vital, 177 foul no Vital. How's that? 160,000 no Vital. Nice, close and personal, just like she likes it. 120,000, and now I'm activating Vital. 336,000. 462,000. 188,000. Beautiful, fantastic, glorious. This is what I recommend. This is what I prefer, and this is the build I suggest you give a spin. Airburst. Yeah, it did. Well, it didn't do a whole lot. Airburst. If Airburst could crit and would apply the slash from Hunter munitions, that would be freaking fantastic. But now you should have all the knowledge that you need to build a weapon to your own individual preferences. If you prefer the meta approach, Vital and Slash will never let you down. Build Vital on the weapon if you want to use that loadout in Circuit. If you prefer my way, then try to build Heat on the weapon and get Vital from an outside source. But if you prefer the more front-loaded damage way, Corrosive and Cold is definitely an option worth exploring. When it comes to arcanes, Primary Merciless is a thing, Primary Vendetta, Shotgun Vendetta is a thing, and of course Primary Frostbite. These are your 3 main options. You do have a bit of leeway in the actual build, but the gameplay style remains mostly the same. We are talking about a shotgun after all. And I do believe, my friends, that's pretty much it. As always, my name is Lazer. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like, favorite, share, and subscribe only if you enjoy the content. If you got any feedback for me, I would love to read it in the comment section down below. You can also catch me on Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, all the usual places. And if you love the content and you want to help me keep making it, consider supporting us via Patreon. There's going to be a link in the upper right portion of the screen right about now. Until next time, my friends. Bye-bye.